Hey guys, if you're interested in Grey Knights as a faction or you're looking to find a new and experimental list, this video is for you because today we are going to be talking about Grey Knights list building and in particular about a new experimental Terminator spam list that I've came up with. So without further ado, let's dive right in. And before we take a look at the list itself, I propose to discuss the strong and weak sides of the general archetype of such a list to understand it better. So you get a lot of OBSEC bodies. It means that controlling objectives should not be a problem for you because your wound models are tough, they have a lot of wounds, and with the help of the unyielding anvil warlord trait, which I recommend to take in any Grey Knights list no matter what your style is. It's basically OBSEC for everything within 6 or double OBSEC for stuff that already has OBSEC trait. And with that, you are pretty much untouchable on objectives as long as you are on them. Secondly, your list is very tough. With Armor of Contempt on all the Terminators, you are going to have 1-up save. It means that basically AP1 you completely ignore, AP2 is your 3-up save, and AP3 only puts you on a 4-up, and you need AP5 to actually get you to your invulnerable save. But it gets better because you get Tide of Shadows with Grey Knights, and it means that you're going to have a 0-up save from 12 inches away. So when you're starting far off and the first turn before opponent closes the distance, you're going to have a 0-up save. It's a very simple calculation. The AP characteristic of the weapon becomes your save. So AP2, again, it's your 2-up save base, and AP4 will get you to your 4-up save. So you don't even need the Sanctuary spell on the Terminators unless you're planning to send them into combat with something that is AP4 or more. Or if you do your job correctly and position your Terminators in such a way that they get light cover, it means that you're going to be having -1 to hit as well, the dense cover part from the Tide of Shadows, which is very, very good. And with the help of your Apothecary, you can always get the 6-up Shrug, which is very important on damage 3 weapons against your 3-wound Terminators. So a lot of survivability in the list you can expect. Next, the list is quite strong in melee. So with Tide of Convergence, you can dish out a lot of mortal wounds in combat. Obviously, you probably want to switch from Shadows to Convergence somewhere on second or third turn, depending on how the game is going. And obviously, you want to have a character which can do that. And this character probably should be somewhere far from the combat in order to keep him alive so that you can use the psychic power when necessary. Terminators with full rerolls to wound from their psychic power are very, very deadly. Of course, you can buff up their melee potential even more depending on what Brotherhood you're going for. If you're playing Rapiers, it's just awesome because you're gonna get that awesome +1 attack psychic power on them, and also the command point, the stratagem to have exploding 6s to hit. If you have a Brotherhood Ancient nearby, again, that's another +1 attack. So the sky's the limit basically. You can get up to, I think, 50 attacks from your squad, something like that, with full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound. Full rerolls to hit obviously from Drago, or if you just have a typical Grandmaster nearby and your Terminators up +1 to hit it from the stratagem, like the Fury of the First, they have something of that sort with Grey Knights as well. So you have a lot of melee potential, that's what I mean. And Terminators are very, very deadly with those damage 2 weapons. In shooting, it's not that awesome, but you have a lot of bolter fire, and bolter fire can be relatively efficient against some targets, like, for example, horde type units and some targets that don't have to up save on them and are not toughness 8. So like you can probably blink off a couple of wounds from the Dreadnought if you are lucky and roll enough 5+ to wound, because I have found as someone who plays with Dreadnoughts a lot that I often lose a lot more wounds than I expect from attacks like multiple shots of strength 4, 5, 6 with almost no AP, just because when you roll a lot of dice, there is a great possibility that you will roll those 1s and 2s. So bolters are not bad, not probably the anti-tank weapon of your dreams, but not bad. And the fourth strong side is you are psychically very, very potent. So your Terminators are the casters, so they can cast and deny, and you are almost unparalleled in the psychic phase if we are not taking the 1,000 Suns into consideration, because obviously they are the real masters of the warp, and Grey Knights are second best place in my humble opinion. And the 5-up Feel No Pain from Mortal Wounds is also very good against psychically heavy armies, and basically it just adds to the second strong side being resilient, because a lot of things nowadays in the game, they do Mortal Wounds on the charge, they do Mortal Wounds on 6s to wounds, whatever. So there is a lot of mortal woundage going on in the game, and you should probably have at least some defense against that, and 5-up Feel No Pain is a very strong defense. So, weak side. Your list is not particularly fast, so obviously Terminators move 5 and not perfect, and you probably, if you want to fire your bolters, you will not be advancing. I would recommend to advance in most cases unless you have a really good target to shoot at, because again, bolters are not the perfect weapon, and I don't recommend to spend a bunch of points on psi cannons and silencers, because again, they are very expensive and they don't add that much to your shooting potential, to be honest, from my experience. So most of your mobility will come from Gate of Infinity, which is a teleport power, a very, very important one, and you should have at least 2 of those with your characters to make sure that you always have a spare one in case your character dies in some unexpected way, and you might lose your best chance of getting to another part of the board, especially at the end of the game where it may matter critically. And it means that you have to time every move in the game very carefully, otherwise you risk getting your units out of position. Out of position means that 1 or 2 turns your 200-point Terminator unit will be just doing nothing, and you don't want that, because it means that you're losing efficiency and you're making it easier for your opponent to counter your moves. So in that sense, this list is not perfect. Secondly, shooting may be limited with this list, obviously, unless you supplement it with something else. And as you'll see in the next section of the video, I have done just that. And of course, we cannot go any further probably than I've done, because it will not be a Terminator spam list then if we just make a balanced list. So bolters are great, as we discussed, but not efficient against toughness 8 targets, not efficient against top safe targets, especially those 2 in combination. That are probably the worst you can imagine. So you definitely need to use your psychic powers to get through the heavier targets, and probably have at least something on the side to help you out in the shooting phase. And of course, the innate weaknesses of Grey Knights are still here. They are extremely expensive, so every model you lose counts, because every model is a psyker. So even if your squad is down to 1 guy, that 1 guy is a psyker, so they have to make the units relatively expensive. They are very CP hungry, so you don't expect to have the chance to protect them with the stratagems all the time. You probably will only have 1 or 2 chances to do that throughout the game, no matter what you do and no matter how you build the list. You have no access to fight last debuffs. You have almost no access to fight first, because Grey Knights have the worst fight first ability in the codex you can imagine. It's literally a relic you have to buy, and then you have to make a psychic action which has a warp charge. So you waste your psychic power of one of your characters, you waste a relic, you then have to roll high enough, which is I think a warp charge 5 action, to actually perform that action, and only then you can select a unit within 3 inches of yours. It's not even like an aura or something like that. It would be at least a balancing factor for this amount of criteria you have to meet, and only then you get fight first. So one of the crappiest fight firsts in the Warhammer 40k as far as I know. So yeah, fighting phase will be mostly dominated by the faction you play against. If they have at least some fight first and fight last, you can probably do nothing about that, apart from just smiting them out of existence. So finally, here is the list. I've chosen Brotherhood Preservers for only one reason, and it's the psychic power they have. Brotherhood psychic power, which allows you to cast 6-up Feel No Pain on your unit, which is not bad, but I wouldn't choose it for that particular reason. I would probably have gone with rapiers instead. And I still think that you may want to opt for rapiers just because it gives you that extra edge in combat. But if you decide to go with preservers, what you get is basically a 6-up shrug Feel No Pain power, or a 5-up shrug if that unit is within range of an apothecary. That's why I have an apothecary here. So we, as you can see, have 5 units of Terminators, Brotherhood Terminators, and one of them is a 10-man blob. So that 10-man blob will always leave with the apothecary, and you will just be shrugging off every wound they suffer on a 5-up thanks to that psychic power. It's a very, very strong ability, especially in combination with the fact that you can actually revive guys for 1 command point with Apothecary. You cannot make him a Chief Apothecary and do that for free as the regular Marines do, but for a command point you still can't revive. For HQs we have a Brotherhood Tech Marine here with the Etheric Conduit Relic, which is basically, it makes him the Master of the Forge, as it's called in the main Space Marine Codex. It means that he heals straight 3 wounds on the vehicles, which is for the 3 dreadnoughts we have in the list, and he can buff up the non-venerable dreadnoughts to give him 2+ ballistic skill. You may ask why I just not go for 3 venerable dreadnoughts. Firstly, it was because of points, and secondly is because we have a very funny stratagem in the Preservers Brotherhood, which is called Charge of the Ancients, which makes this dreadnought 8-inch move, gives him an 8-inch move, gives him damage 4 on his fist, and reroll charges, which I think is a fair deal for just 1 command point. But I did not like the fact that he was shooting on 3s instead of 2s, like the Venerable Dreadnoughts. Hence the Brotherhood Tech Marine in the list. If you play with the list, you can probably fit the 3 Venerable Dreadnoughts and a Librarian, but you will have to cut on one of the tame Terminators from the 10-man unit out. So it's a give or take situation depending on what you want, but I think 1 funny, fast Dreadnought and 2 Venerable Dreadnoughts are a nice combination. So, Tech Marine, we've discussed him. Calder Drago, I don't think he needs too much of an explanation. He's probably the best character, the most universal one we have in the Grey Knights book nowadays. He is the new Valdus, because Valdus was the main guy in the previous edition, but now we have Drago. He's extremely expensive, unreasonably so, I think, but he knows 3 powers, which is very important because it gives us flexibility and we can actually cast 3 if we pay a command point. It allows us to have a very potent character in combat with his damage 3 sword and 6 attacks, I think, and full rerolls to hit for our big 10-man Brotherhood Terminator squad is also not a joke. 5 units of Terminators with swords, because nowadays I think swords are the best choice. Usually I would say halberds, because strength 6 is one of the most universal strength in the game. However, with Armor of Contempt nowadays, AP2 is just slightly not enough, in my opinion, to be potent in combat against anything that has power armor, so hence these swords. Obviously, if you have models that already have halberds on them, it's not a big deal. There are a bunch of targets that halberds are actually better against, like wounding on 2s against toughness 3 models or toughness 5 models, so a lot of stuff you'll be glad to have halberds instead of swords, but mostly I would go for swords if you can. As you can see, we have on the Justicar in the Brotherhood Terminator squad, we have a Nemesis Demon Hammer. Whenever you can fit a Demon Hammer on the Sergeant, I recommend to do so because it's a very, very good weapon, and 10 points is much less than some pay for Thunderhammer. I think in the Space Marine book you pay more than that, if I am not mistaken. So a great weapon and perfect on Sergeant because of his extra attack. Next is the Brotherhood Apothecary with the already discussed unyielding adultery to make sure that those objectives stay yours no matter what. And he has a Nemesis Demon Hammer as well, because Brotherhood Apothecary is a surprisingly good character for combat, and you really want him to be able to stand up for himself. He does have a relic. You would probably go for a Cuirass of Sacrifice because it's the best defensive relic you have in the book. 5-up Feel No Pain and +1 to his save, so he will be on a constant constant 0 up save and a -1 save in cover. Also, Curse of Sacrifice is the funniest relic because you can actually get to -2 armor save if you give that relic to a librarian and then cast Armored Resilience on the librarian himself and then put the librarian into cover. You can actually be at -2 save. It means that it's so funny. It means that you will have a 2-up save against AP4 weapons from ranged attacks, which is just crazy. And you would have a 6-up save, armor save against a Tau railgun. So yeah, it's a very funny thing, but we're not here to discuss these crazy experimental things. Well, this list is slightly crazy, but not as crazy as what I've just described. So yeah, 3 dreadnoughts after that, the regular dreadnought with the Charge of the Ancient strat, a heavy plasma cannon on all of them, and obviously dreadnought combat weapons because we want to have combat ability on our dreadnought blobs all the time. And that list comes down to 2,000 points on the nose and 3 command points, which is slightly less than I would like for Grey Knights, because I'd like to start Grey Knights list at 4 command points, just to have that extra one for the defense, but it's good enough. There's also an option here which you can go for. You can change that list up, slightly play with the points, and probably make that 10-man Brotherhood Terminator squad into a Paladin squad. Why you would want to do that? Firstly, because Paladins are better in combat, and you already have Drago and his rerolls work on Paladins, unlike every other reroll that you get from Grey Knights. And they can cast Armored Resilience on themselves, which means that they will have a 0-up save from everything and -1 save if they are in combat from whatever, a Ruin or Tide of Shadows. So they are a bit more resilient than the regular Terminators, even if you consider the 5-up Feel No Pain, because you can still have a 6-up Feel No Pain on them from the Apothecary. So that's kind of what you can change up. You would have to sacrifice something here. You probably will not fit 4 or 5-man Brotherhood Terminator squads. You'll probably only fit 3, but that may be worth it, especially if you manage to get something extra nice into there, like an extra HQ. So there's a big field for experimentation here in this list. Let me know what you think about that. I would love to hear your theories in the comment section below, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.